Right.
It doesn't really count anymore because it's
Okay, well, it is 3 o'clock Thursday, September 4th, and I will call this Lodging Tax Advisory Committee meeting to order. Since we have a new member, why don't we just do roll call in a way that we
close the YouTube window you have open. There you go. It's working.
There we go. So obviously YouTube is about 5 seconds behind us, maybe 7. So let's start over here with roll call and we'll swing around the table.
Hi, my name is Chad Carpenter.
Ruth Weigel.
Andrew Shin.
Chelsea Yarwood.
I'm Shannon Kelly Fong, and I'm the Assistant City Manager for the City of Lacey.
Annie Reinhardt.
And your place of business is
Candlewood Suites.
Candlewood Suites. I am Malcolm Miller, Deputy Mayor for the City of Lacey.
Sadie Siglin, Management Analyst, City of Lacey.
Okay, so
And then we have Paul clerking today.
yeah, I didn't know Paul wanted to, not being incognito.
I usually like to stay behind her.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
He's the wizard.
Okay, next item is our land acknowledgement, and I usually read the whole thing, even though I know a lot of times it doesn't get all read. We, the City of Lacey, are on the ancestral land of the tribal people of this Treaty of Medicine Creek, including the Squaw Indian tribe and the Squaxin Island tribe. We acknowledge and remember those tribal people not recognized today who were absorbed or relocated into other tribes for survival. We recognize the ancestors and their descendants who are still here. We recognize and respect the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek as the traditional stewards of this land since time immemorial and their role today in taking care of these lands in perpetuity. We recognize and have the responsibility to call attention to the histories of dispossession, forced removal, and abridged treaty rights that allowed our nation, state, and city to develop as they have today. We recommend that the community members read the Treaty of Medicine Creek of 1854. And with that, I need a motion for our agenda.
So moves.
Second.
It is moved and seconded. Is there any
Minutes as well.
Oh, right, and the minutes from our July 10th meeting.
It's been seconded.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. Are there any discussions about the minutes or the agenda for today? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes unanimously. Let's see here. Public comment. We didn't have any written public comment. Okay, is there anybody on Zoom wishing to comment?
No, there are not.
Is there anybody in this room wishing to comment? Okay, seeing none, we can move on. Our first business item is to welcome our new Commissioner, Annie Reinhardt and Sadie.
I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention that we do have a new advisory board member, Annie, here with us today from Candlewood Suites. So this committee is now fully staffed with 2 representatives from businesses eligible to collect lodging tax, 2 representatives from activities eligible to receive the tax, and 1 city council member. So welcome, Annie, to the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee. Annie did do an onboarding with me to kind of go over how this committee reviews applications, the selection process, and how we send those recommendations to council. So she should be well prepared to jump right into our busy season.
Welcome aboard.
Welcome.
Yeah, welcome.
Next, we are going to have a finance update from Chelsea Yarwood, our county manager. Hi, Chelsea.
Hi, thank you, everybody. So I've talked to you guys a couple times this year. So in front of you, you do have kind of a budget year-to-date document. Some of it has 2024 actual numbers, which we've already gone over, so I won't go over those again. But I will provide some updates where we're at for 2025 year-to-date, and that is really through July, because at the time of running this information, July was what we actually had all the way completed. So hotel-motel tax collections through July equal just over 281,000 of the projected 540,000. This is equivalent to about 52%. So a generic analysis of year-to-date through July would be closer to 58%, just kind of a 7 divided by 12. But 52% that we're seeing right now is pretty typical pacing for lodging tax, so it's not of any alarm or concern or anything like that. As of last year, we had collected 51% by the same time frame in the year, so we're doing really good. And we also, as you guys probably remember from last year, we exceeded the budget amount. So again, still in a good place. Interest income, we've actually already collected total budgeted revenue projection and then some. So we'll expect that to continue to increase through the end of the year. Expenses, if you look at expenses the same way we did revenues as far as a percentage basis, we've expended 65% of our budget, which sounds a little bit alarming, but you'll have to keep in mind that a number of larger costs occur in the first half of the year. So we expect that to kind of equal out as the year progresses. An example would be the RAC maintenance and operations funding of $180,000. That the whole thing just already occurred. So that's why that looks the way it does.
Does the RAC portion, does that happen like right at the beginning of the year?
No, it doesn't. We do that kind of as a mid-year transfer in June. So yeah. Let's see. Any questions on 25? That's a really broad look at where we're at here today. I don't know, Sadie, were you planning to go into any more details about the projects that got funded so far? Or any questions on that?
Typically wrap up the current year at the beginning of the next calendar year when we have all of the expenses and the budget closed and all of the reimbursements done.
Okay, great.
Are some of these not happening? Where did I see one that I didn't think happened?
There are a few award recipients this year who have reached out and let us know that they will not be conducting their activities. So we will see some roll over for those and we'll have a more accurate number when we have our end of year update.
Yeah.
Is the Shoots Rugby done with their?
The Shoots Rugby did not apply for 2025.
Well, no, I mean, it looks like in 2024, or was that the award amount?
They did use less than they were awarded in the previous funding cycle.
And then the interest income, does that represent all of 24 or what is that?
The interest income, so, well, the 24 is that kind of second column over, so 36,795 is what we collected in 24.
Okay.
And then so far, we've collected the 56,754 this year, which is definitely outpacing that projected interest income.
And those get poured back in and are usable?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
You know, we were talking about that at the end of council this past week, and there was some uncertainty because I was like, I think it gets rolled back in, I'm pretty sure, but thank you for clarifying that.
Great, I can talk about 26. So for 2026, we still feel really comfortable with the projection for the hotel-motel tax collection to be that $560,000 that we've presented before. But there is a little bit of a change to the document we received. So the interest income on the original document was $27,500. We're actually projecting that through kind of our normal City of Lacey overall big picture budget process, that's going to be closer to $17,000. So if that is the case, then you would be able to allocate about $577,000 worth of kind of total revenues to apply towards projects and events and things. So
Not surprising.
Right.
Chelsea, can you say that one more time? 577?
Yeah, just number. And that's of course in addition to any reserves that you may or may not decide to utilize in your work process. And those numbers have not changed. So the 267,420 that I've reported before is still the reserve amount that you can anticipate having available.
Thank you.
That's all I have to report for a financial update, unless there's any other questions.
Anything else, Scott?
The interest income, is that in a money market account or something like that, or is it
We have
investments or?
yeah, so we have investment, like a core set of investment dollars that go through actual the investing, like we have a professional services contractor, somebody helps us with our investments, but we also utilize the Washington State Local Government Investment Pool, so LGIP, which is kind of like money market, I guess. So we have a combination, not all of our eggs are in one basket. So,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Making sure.
Yeah.
Are they over 4%?
Yeah, so in July, the LGIP pool, for instance, was at 4.39. Yeah.
Okay.
So we're in good shape there.
Buy some Tesla stock or something.
All right, thank you for your report, Chelsea.
Yeah. Chelsea, before we move on, do you also want to talk a little bit about the fund balance and the reserves?
Yeah, so this is that number I was talking about. It hasn't really changed since last year. So that 267,420 is still that ending balance you guys can count on. So that's kind of 909,000 was the 2025 beginning of year. And then we always hold some aside for some intended use. So that's going to be budget use of reserves if needed for the 2025 budget. That's kind of how that was balanced. And then the rack synthetic field replacement, which is another project that money's been kind of held aside for that. And then we always just best practice have a 2-month operating reserve as well. So all of those pieces come off the top to get you to that $267,000 of reserves that's available.
So we've been holding on to the synthetic field replacement dollars for quite a while.
As long as I've been here, for sure.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that it's making interest, you know, and it's producing income. Is there a plan? Is there, when are we supposed to replace those fields? Do we know? Does anybody know? I know Parks isn't here.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the fields are on a replacement cycle, and so we're just anticipating the next replacement. And so we can certainly get an update on Parks specifically when they're looking to do that. But I know they're also, looking at the third phase of the rack as well. And so just kind of understanding, some of the synthetic field options are being considered as part of that project.
Do you think it's possible that they may ask for some of these dollars for the new phase that they're going into?
I mean, I certainly think that's something that the city will consider as part of, future planning.
So you guys know we're trying to do upgrade the soccer fields and make them more like we have bleachers and these types of things. And I think about what's the name of the firm who did the rental course, SJC or something like that?
I know they were working with PVP and
There's another company that came and did a presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. We can get that information from Jen and get back to you. But it was about 2 months ago, I believe, when they did an update to the city council, and that's all available online, and so you can go back and listen to the conversation in whole.
And if I had thought of it, I would have asked for the honors agenda because I wanted to see what was happening to the rack.
Also, is LTAC shouldering the entire cost of the replacement, or is that just a
No,
portion? Because I know it's going to cost a little more than 500,000.
it's going to be like $1 million.
$1 million.
Oh,
And the other funds are going to come from
Most likely Parks or General Funds.
General Fund. Okay.
You guys know we went out for NPD,
What's in PP?
Metropolitan Parks District.
Oh,
Yeah, Tumwater has one, Olympia has one, and it's just basically a taxing district that we would do 45 cents on the thousand to supplement some of these parks activities, replacements, all these different kinds of fun things. We put it on the ballot, and it missed by 688 votes. Ouch. So
Yeah.
with those dollars, the anticipation, the thought that we were having was, we can do a lot of park upgrades, we can replace equipment. We could, you can actually bond on those dollars. There's a whole gamut of things that we could do, but it just wasn't to be this time around. So this will be, it was not to supplant general funds. It was to be in addition to. And so we'll be in this same situation for maybe another 5 years. We'll try it again or something. I don't know. There's no schedule to try it again.
so okay. So we're not going to try again next year.
We're going to try it again next year. The last time we did it was
2018. Yep.
Or 60? Was it 60?
No, I think 2018.
Yeah.
So to go back to your question though for just a second. So I guess one thing of noting that there are, multiple fields at the rack, and, when we're talking about a replacement of being, $1 million in today's dollars, that obviously looks different depending on when the construction happens. And then there's also, multiple fields to be replaced. Troy did just provide me an update that the next round of field replacements is going to start in 2028. So we can anticipate in the future that, some of these dollars may be requested for, and that the project itself, again, taking into account multiple fields being replaced, would finish sometime in 2031. And its anticipated cost right now is about $2.9 million.
Yeah. One thing I didn't think of at the beginning of the Fed raising rates, and us, getting more interest income, was actually taking some of that interest income and putting it into some of these reserve accounts. I just didn't think of it. I should have, because of, doing it on a personal level, but I think that could have, helped out a little bit in terms of, supplying some extra dollars for the field replacement. Because the rack is our number one draw. It's our main heads and
Oh,
beds
exactly.
thing that we have.
Mhm.
So that book kind of got me stumbled, but maybe in this next cycle we can try to take a look at that and see if there is something that we could do. Let's say, for example, of our interest income, maybe we dedicate 10% to reserves or something along those lines. Just something to think about as we finish out the cycle and head into a new one. I think I should be interested.
Will that fully pause the operations for the rack?
I think that's why part of the approach is kind of the field by field, is so that you are going to impact obviously some of the operations there. And we know, especially during peak season in the summer months, that most of those fields are booked.
Yeah.
So we will see, some disruption of operations, but part of it is to try to minimize as we're going through the cycle.
Can we just pause for summer? That'd be nice.
Unfortunately, too, oftentimes that's our peak construction season as well.
And synthetic.
And that's part of that extension of life, right? Of
Right.
making sure that we can play, more frequently.
Gotcha.
So one of the other things is, we are hoping to bring on some new hotels online in this next 2 years. There's a couple out in Hotch Prairie that I'm really interested in because they're so close to the freeway. I think in the next 3 to 5 years, these dollars will be strengthened by at least a couple hundred new rooms. So that's another thing that I would like this committee to be able to track on an agenda, so we know
When they're coming.
when they're coming, who's issuing, requesting permits, and who's breaking ground, and where.
All three of them
hotels.
already got permits, didn't they?
I don't know that the one in Hotch Prairie in the Brittany Parkway Plaza does yet.
Oh, okay. So all three of them.
So I can add a little
Can you
bit.
add?
And so in July was when we had the last update, and we'll certainly make sure that we're staying in touch with community economic development for anything that is coming down the pike or if any of these projects move forward. But this information was provided to you all earlier. So we do have 3 proposed hotels, and they're in various stages of permitting. So we have a Residence Inn by Marriott in Britain Plaza by what will be Providence, or by Providence's location, and it's a proposal for 136 rooms. There was a grading permit issued, but they have not yet picked up their building permit. For Homewood Suites, this is at Hogum Bay Center, just south of the Starbucks and the Dough Zone. There is a proposal for 128 room. The building permit was submitted in December, and the city was waiting for revisions, some request revisions, and then finally there was the True by Hilton, which is also located near Hogum Bay, and no permits have been issued for that project. This was as of July, and again, we'll keep in touch with our Community and Economic Development Department to see if there's any updates in the future.
Oh, so
So
what's
what's
home load? Like I thought that was a home 2. Okay.
So that's somewhere in the neighborhood of 350 new rooms.
162.
362.
Yep.
Okay. I think that'll add to our numbers because right now, all of this is based on, I can't remember how many rooms we currently have. Okay. So, who knows? 3 to 5 years and numbers could really increase and we could do a lot more good.
It just means more competition for Amy, though.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking about that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like
But
that.
isn't the Nisqually tribe also building that casino with a resort type
Yeah.
betting? Is that going to be subject to LTAC dollars at all?
I don't think so. So when it's tribal to tribal, it's non-tax.
Gotcha.
But when it's tribal to non-tribal, not sure how that's going to work.
Yeah, I think the short answer to that question is that project is got a long way in its development, and there's a lot of discussions and conversations that need to occur. And so I don't think any information we can provide right now is a very helpful direction in what would or wouldn't be.
We're headed into an interesting direction as we grow.
Right.
Trish said you said you're done with the report. Chelsea, sorry. I don't know why I want to call you Tricia.
I don't know, I was like,
2 years, I don't want to call you Tricia.
that's funny.
Okay.
Yes, I'm done with my part, thank
Okay.
you.
Tricia and Stacey.
I did have to look around
That
the
is
room for
never
a
gonna be
second.
the same.
Tricia, is that like
So I have a friend named Tricia who owns a print shop around the corner. And you guys kind of look at her. She was also the worship leader. Next, we have our lodging tax funding application cycle extension. Sadie's going to talk a little bit about that. Do you mind if I lead out on that? Just briefly.
Yes, go ahead.
So, the FIFA thing. Yeah. So there's been a lot of back and forth. We started at 1.5 million, and it's been reduced down. And so we started at one location, and it was like, hey, let's do multiple locations because the price is high. There's been a lot of back and forth on how this could or should work. And so,
Between who? The cities?
yeah, between the cities and the chamber.
Okay.
And so last night we talked about the possibility of extending 2 weeks so that they can get their application in. And cities can talk a little more in depth about that.
So, as Deputy Mayor mentioned, at this week's council meeting, the Lacey City Council provided direction for the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee to reopen the application period for the 2026 lodging tax funding applications, and that is to allow applicants, including the FIFA fan zone, the opportunity to apply. So the current application cycle has been reopened and will remain open until Friday, September 19th at 5 p.m. for all applicants. So what that means for us is a slight delay in our selection process, which I will touch on more. But currently we have made some adjustments. A press release was issued, and so it has been announced. The application itself has been reopened online, so that is available for interested organizations to submit their application. And then we will have some rescheduled meetings for this committee to be able to consider any applications that are submitted in this kind of second period and window. So long-term, what that means, and including for this cycle, is that the budget and the adoption of these recommendations by the Lacey City Council will no longer be tied with the budget cycle the way it has been historically. Historically, this committee makes recommendations to the City Council, and those are all reviewed and approved or recommended for change at the same time during the same process. So with this change, we will not be able to submit our recommendations to the council in time for the budget process, but the council has also requested that they want to look more closely at the funding recommendations. So that will be separate from the budget cycle. So the Lacey City Council will now still approve the revenues for lodging tax that Chelsea just reviewed. However, the individual awards will not be approved or rolled into the budget. So this committee will be able to make their recommendations after they have historically. So what will happen is the committee will make recommendations. The city will present to the council, here is the committee's recommendations for use of the funding you approved in the adoption, and we will proceed in that way, starting effective this year. So we don't have to worry about having that extended timeline either, because that will be an independent process. Now, some things that will not change are the timing of the cycle. So although it's a separate approval process by council, the timeline and our application periods won't change. And a lot of that has to do with budget alignment still. We need the best possible projections and summaries from our finance department to give accurate projections to this committee. That will also allow us to still consider any potential rollover and unused funds from the end of the cycle from applicants who didn't use their funding. That will also help preserve the consistency with our applicants. I know regionally we have all met and tried to make the application process as streamlined for all of our applicants. knowing that they apply at other jurisdictions, as well as most of our applicants know when the funding cycle is here. So that will help with that. It also helps applicants who have annual activities. Some of our facilities or long-term ongoing multiple occurrence events, they can still do their planning and plan their budgets for an annual calendar year, just like the city budget and what they're used to. That also still keeps the city on track for all of our administrative timelines. We still need to do our annual report to JLARC on actual attendance. We still need to renew our contracts with our award recipients, which happen and are effective January to December. And then we do also still need to have all of those reimbursements processed by a certain time for the city's budget cycle. So although the approval process changes, we still really would like to maintain this process in the same timely manner that this committee is used to. Questions about?
So how long do we anticipate the council, if they're gonna look over the applicants or our suggestions? What is their timeline to do that?
That's a good question. So this year is slightly unique in that the council is also reviewing potential revenue sources and strategies, which I'll touch on. So typically the suggestion would be to take the recommendations to the council and have them review and give them the opportunity to recommend any changes or different direction. This year, it's anticipated that they will review the recommendations and then go back at another meeting to take action on those recommendations.
But
Now,
what's the timeline? I mean, like, is this extending us out a couple weeks or what?
yes,
Yes.
so
Okay.
great question. So this is us here today doing our review. We have extended those applications to the 19th. We will still keep this committee's regularly scheduled meeting on the 25th. Instead of that being used to make our final budget decisions, we will just transition to reviewing applications and selecting any potential candidates for interview. And this is a meeting that this committee had regularly scheduled. And then the plan is to add or reschedule some meetings that this committee had previously to be on October 9th and October 16th. That October 9th meeting would provide this committee the opportunity to interview any candidates that they wanted to further ask questions about the applications. And then on the 16th, come back and make your final funding recommendations. Now, in between those dates, the City Council is having a discussion on revenue strategies, which includes looking at lodging tax funds, and that is also when the City Council will get what I will call a lodging tax 101 presentation on what we all review here every time, what lodging tax is, statutorily the uses, and kind of a look at how this committee goes through the application process, because that's not something that they have great detail on. So when this committee reconvenes on the 16th, any potential feedback from the City Council on the 12th can be presented to you all as well. Once you have made your recommendations, the City Council will then see those recommendations in early November and then have the opportunity to review and then come back to take action or make any adjustment recommendations, which will still put us in time to issue those contracts early January for next term's recipients.
Question, do you think that in November, after the council reviews recommendations, that we will be meeting back together as a team?
If the council recommends different funding, potentially, so the council can always recommend different allotments of funding. They cannot recommend to fund applicants or parties who did not go through the traditional application cycle, but there is the potential that they could recommend different funding for things, and there is some limitations with a turnaround time for that. That's not something that this committee has seen historically, but there is the potential, yes, that could happen, and you would all be notified.
City, one more addition if I
Yeah.
could. So I would just highlight too, kind of taking it out of the budget process, which Sadie just outlined really well, and having it as kind of its own standalone item is also consistent with what we do with some other grant programs here at the city. So our human service grants, as an example, follows a very similar pattern where the Human Service Commission makes recommendation, and then that goes to council, council reviews it, and then council makes, final determinations. So it's consistent with our other internal processes.
Just to touch on that council revenue strategies, during the 2025 council retreat, the Lacey City Council met, and one thing they discussed was short and long-term financial strategies. And they have elected to review potential revenue sources as part of this year's work plan and look at any sources for short-term things immediately. As you can see up here, there are several fees, taxes, and other funding sources that the city has, that the city council is taking a closer look at how those funds are used, how those could be strategically used for future investment. And one of those things does include lodging tax. So they will be receiving, like I mentioned, kind of a lodging tax 101, how those funds are used, and may have some feedback on and guidance on strategies as to how they would like to see the funding directed or allocated. So that's something, as you can see up here, they're reviewing all different types of taxes and fees at the city. And so lodging tax is on that list of things. So that's on the 12th, what they will be reviewing, and may have potential feedback for this committee when we come back to reconvene.
None of these are going to increase, are they?
That's what I was,
Yeah, just like,
I was just gonna say,
I
I
pay
think
for
there's
those.
an increase in taxes,
Correct.
just a new direction, or
You
also
know
new
what,
direction, but just direction.
gambling tax.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Potential designations, funding strategies. Lodging tax specifically has statutory limits. Lodging tax cannot be increased. Lacey is collecting the maximum allowable amount. So that is something, as far as this committee is concerned.
No, but they might give us recommendations on whether you fund fundraisers or.
Exactly, they may provide guidance on
Yeah.
things, and a direction. Kind of similarly, this committee has reviewed options for funding strategies and allocations. So when we meet again on the 16th, after they have reviewed this information, I will be able to provide an update on their feedback and any potential recommendations and impacts that those recommendations may have.
And so just to jump in really quickly on this topic too, I think it's important to recognize, and it's well documented in the 2025 work plan, as well as the conversations that the council is going through. The reason why we're going through these exercises of taking a look at revenue sources is because as of right now, projecting into 2026 and beyond, there are budget deficits. And so we are having to take a look at what our opportunities and options are for the council to make some decisions moving forward. And so we've had one conversation prior to this with the council 2 weeks ago. And you can, again, you watch it all in real time if you want to, where we went over technology fees, public record fees, specifically body worn cameras. We have not talked about business and occupation taxes, but gambling and franchise fees we have. And so those other items we're going to be returning back to continue to have conversations. And council has provided some direction to look into some things, but at this point in time, there haven't been any final decisions on any potential increases.
And just so you guys know and understand, I'm gonna add to that. The flip side of this point is also under review the expenses. And so we haven't had that in a council work session yet, but Rick and his team are taking a look at where expenses can be cut as well. So it's not just the revenue side.
Don't close City Hall on Fridays though. Don't.
Yeah, so staffing is another place where we've had some turnover. And so yes, we adjust the hours in this interim, but once staffing is back up, we won't. We should go back to normal operations, hopefully.
As far as the extended process, I will follow up with an email for this committee about the adjustment to the scheduled meetings. What we're looking at is having the originally intended meeting that that would have occurred next Thursday, the 11th, and the following Thursday, the 18th, be rescheduled for those October dates. So I will follow up and update you all with those dates and information. Additionally, all of the applicants will be updated regarding the change of date to potentially need to provide a supplemental interview. So all of that information will go out. Right.
So, that was
Just a real quick, sorry, point
Yeah,
of
go ahead.
clarification before the next point. So on city hall operations, I think that what you're referring to is our utility billing department. But I just want to make sure it's clear that we are operational
Yeah.
across other departments on Fridays. There have just been some
Oh, I
adjustments
didn't
to
mean you
utility
guys
billing.
on Fridays. I didn't mean you guys on Fridays. I just don't want to see us closed down totally.
Did you have any other comments about the extended cycle?
I did. The notification, how do we know? Did we know it or?
Yes, so part of the application, it was noticed the potential date for interviews, so everybody who has submitted an application currently, including anyone who submits an application during the extended period, will receive an email notification to the point of contact, letting them know about the change. And then, as you all know, interviews are not necessarily required. They are scheduled at the discretion of this committee. So that is kind of just to inform them that there is a place for that. But yes, we do always email updates, and it's part of the application and acknowledgement that they understand there may be a presentation. So most of our applicants are prepared in anticipation of having correspondence about that.
So is this gonna be yearly, this new schedule, not September?
The intention would be to keep the schedule the same. This year, we have that extended period,
Right.
and but then hoping next year to still go back to the Thursdays in September, and then the one April meeting to do the end of year recap for the previous cycle. So yeah, these adjustments would be unique, but continuing allows us to meet all of those benchmarks that I mentioned about getting all of the application and reporting materials done in time still.
So does this set a precedence if something should come up next year, that it could change to?
I think that the intention would be to improve communication about the application cycle and potentially more in advance. So anything happens, and
Okay,
council discussions about direction for lodging tax may potentially impact that as well. But as of now,
Yeah.
there's no intention to have any further extended period. This year, we did also open the application period earlier than normal to allow extended time. And I think that that would be the recommendation for future cycles, would be to maintain this schedule with the extended opening earlier that we implemented this year.
I think, like Sadie mentioned, it's our plan to move forward with the schedule that we've previously had. I think the benefit is you all now have a couple extra weeks of review that Sadie's going to go over with some of the applications that we do have.
Other questions, comments, concerns about the application cycle?
No.
Excellent. Deputy Mayor, thank you.
Heads and beds. More heads and beds is what I think is happening here. So, is it that concludes your presentation?
For item C, yes, we're going to move on to D.
Okay, moving on, we're gonna move on to our last agenda item, review of 2026 lodging tax funding applications, and Sadie will be presenting again.
Deputy Mayor stole my thunder with the heads and beds. So, quick review, as we always do, the lodging tax funding is intended for tourism promotion, strictly for tourism marketing, operations and marketing at specials of events and festivals, and those operation and capital expenditures of tourism related facilities, both owned by municipalities or public facility districts, or owned and operated by nonprofit organizations. The lodging tax funding, as we know, is generated based off overnight lodging stays in Lacey and the Lacey urban growth area. So the goal with this funding is to get those visitors to travel to Lacey, to stay and pay to stay over the night in Lacey lodging. And then we, as the city, you as this committee and the city council, can redesignate and distribute those funds to be used for tourism marketing facilities and events to further bring people back to Lacey. Just a quick recap, earlier this year, this committee met and did have some updated policies in regards to the application cycle. Do want to know, as the city council reviews funding strategies for lodging tax, these policies could be impacted and need to change. And so should that happen, this committee will be able to review and adjust. But at this time, the committee did introduce some new policies this year, one being the preparatory event expenses, which would allow recipients who receive funding to use up to 40% of their award in advance of the activities occurring, specifically for marketing expenses only. That will be updated in their contract language this year. The other policy that this committee implemented was to designate 5% up to $40,000 of lodging tax revenues to be dedicated to the city for administrative expenses related to the operations of the lodging tax program. These are also things that the committee decided to implement this year, but at their discretion and the discretion of the city council may change year to year. The other guidelines that this committee reviewed earlier this year were to establish potential award minimums. So when considering granting awards, this committee decided, when possible, that they would try not to recommend awards less than $5,000 to help increase the award amounts to meaningful value and maximize events and their tourism impact. Additionally, this committee decided to consider a maximum award of $25,000 for eligible tourism-related facilities located outside of Lacey and the urban growth area. Again, this committee elected to use those as guidelines, but not necessarily the formal policies. So 2 things to consider when updating and reviewing the application materials. We do have one administrative update that is going out, and this is something that the city has been reviewing in context to all of its advisory boards, and that is any potential conflicts of interest, recognizing that advisory board members may have conflict of interest based on personal, professional, or financial interests that could influence or appear to influence decision-making on the advisory board they serve on. So recognizing in some instances that just the presence of an individual or body language of an individual could inadvertently influence decision-making. Historically, this advisory board, as we know, has representatives from activities and facilities and has done a really great job about announcing and recusing themselves from discussion on those topics. To be consistent with how all of our other advisory boards operate, we would like to update that and when possible have advisory board members leave the room during those discussions and funding decisions, just again to make sure that the city is conducting business consistently and removing any potential conflict of interest. So if possible, we would like to have this committee start doing that, recognizing there may be an exception if you're in a situation that could impact having a quorum as far as presence at the meetings. Is there any questions about that?
So if someone is more outspoken and they would have to leave the room?
I think what that would mean is if I, Sadie's Dalmatian Express, applied for lodging tax funding, and then we as a committee were discussing my application, because I am a participant in that activity, I would let the staff representative know ahead of time, hey, there's a conflict of interest regarding an application today. And then when my application came up for review, I would recuse myself and step out of the room for a moment and then come back in once that discussion were done. The way this committee operates, as we know, we kind of review applications at one point and then we do our funding selection. So similarly, doing that funding decision meeting, when it came to discuss funding Sadie's Super Dalmatians, I would recuse myself from that topic and leave the room and then come back Now, when we're doing a recap at the end and it's, discussed every time it's mentioned, I don't necessarily need to leave the room. But in an instance where my activity is specifically being reviewed and the discussion of how much funding should be recommended for my activity, it would be appropriate for me to recuse myself by leaving the room.
So that is consistent with other committees, that's how they operate?
Yes.
Because, we've never had the problem before, I don't, but I guess I could see that.
Yeah,
A
and
little
this
bit
is
of
not,
background.
yeah.
So yes, and I think, so part of what we did last year was we had our clerks kind of talk about some best practices for meeting management. And this was an item that came up and certainly we wanted to take a look at and evaluate it. And then as I mentioned, we have a human services grant program, and that was how we approached that with them as well. So we did have members of that advisory board who are involved in some of the groups that could be eligible for funding and had applied. And so they did leave the room while that was being discussed and come back in.
For me, I think it's really interesting for the fact that, yes, it affects two of us in this room off the top, to not be shy about it, but also the fact that it is a public forum and the video is available to us on a separate channel. We can go, be on the hallway. It's very interesting. And also that we're not the final decision makers. It still goes through council, which council will be the ones that are creating, finalizing this process. So to me, it feels like there still is a checks and balance in there, even though there is a recusal process. And I do understand the recusal process. It just doesn't seem best use of time or energy. So that's just, I want to go on record with that because we are not the final decision makers. It still goes in front of a council that we do not influence. And they have every right to bring this back to the committee and say, you need to do X, Y, and Z, or make those recommendations to us. So I feel like this is kind of, to me, I'm just going to say it. I think this is silly, but I will do what needs to be done for the sake of this committee.
And I do think that brings up a good point, is we do have representatives from businesses who collect the tax. So should any of those representatives directly sponsor or potentially financially donate to events in their capacity, we would ask the same, that they recuse themselves and let that be known. Now, obviously, you collaborate with other events and businesses as activities, and our hoteliers, as we like to call them, do work with businesses and activities. So there is a level of discussion and involvement that can't be avoided, as you mentioned, because the structure of this committee is unique and that you have to be participating. But were there an instance where my Sadie Suites Hotel directly donated $10,000 to my Sadie Super Dalmatians, I would have to leave the room as a hotelier and say that I would have a potential conflict of interest in that case. So that would be unique. We haven't run into that issue historically that I'm aware of with those representatives, but that is a good point, Chad, and that could potentially impact our other representatives.
And what happens in this room when we don't have a quorum because of that?
Well, I think that's where if possible,
Okay.
right? So if we lose quorum, you have to stay here. But it could be something where maybe you physically kind of separate yourself from the discussion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we've stayed quiet in the past, so
Yeah.
We've been.
I
here
haven't
to-
scared anybody down.
I know.
And again, this isn't in reaction to anybody in this room.
I don't feel
Best
that way. I
practices.
don't feel that way.
Yes. And
Chad every year is like, I'm just gonna shut up.
Yeah.
When it came to
Just
that.
some valid points though, so.
Turn your chair
On the
around.
note of time too, Chad, it really wasn't a big, when we again had to do it a couple of times for human services, it wasn't a huge significant lift, so.
And so just so everybody knows, we've adhered to this in the past, right?
Yeah.
And we'll adhere to it in the future. And we've all been on enough boards and committees that we know this stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
So I know how, getting a reminder can feel like, wait a minute, what? Right? Me?
We're
but
usually really good about
We've been good about this for years.
This doesn't apply to us, really.
Yeah, as Shannon mentioned, this isn't in response to any incident or anything, just as the city is evaluating its processes and improving consistency and equity. One of those things. So, and you all are very great about communicating any potential conflicts. So if you feel you have any, please let me know.
Go to the corner.
Otherwise, we can kind of go on and looking at the application scoring tool and rubric. You do all have a printed copy of the scoring rubric criteria in front of you as well. but just reviewing, these tools were updated this year. We made some significant changes.
It's the one I think, it's the,
You should have a copy printed in front of
Page
you
3.
right now.
She does in front of her, she's online.
I can do that, we did that, all of that. So you as a committee have all already received a copy of the scoring tool and the budget tool, which I will get to. At this time, I would recommend all of the information for applicants who applied during the initial applicant window have submitted their information. I would recommend taking this time to still score all of the applications that we do already have. And then once the extended application window closes, I will send you all a second worksheet. So there doesn't have to be any back and forth. So any additional applications, you will receive another one and be able to score, but I would take this time and the adjustments with our time schedule to score and review and make recommendations on everything that we have. Currently, you all have access to review those applications online.
so I question, can you go
Yes.
back, put that bottom scoring sheet? I got the
Rubric.
rubric, but I don't have that, I can't find it online.
That was sent in an email, so after our meeting, I can follow up and show you
I've
the,
looked and looked for it, but.
yeah, and we will make sure, I know there were some issues with
Yeah.
email correspondence with city issued emails, so we can check
Yeah.
that, but
Anyway, I
hopefully,
just would like to get a copy
yeah,
of that.
hopefully everyone else received the email with the guidance, including the worksheet that has 2 tabs, one of the tabs being this scoring tool. That scoring tool
Oh,
does
Maybe I,
reflect here all of the corresponding categories and is set up to match the point criteria, so you can only select predetermined options. So it hopefully is very easy to use. I did want to highlight a few of the scoring categories that did have significant change from previous cycles, as we did update the funding application and streamline it to make it a little shorter and consistent. One of the categories that was updated was the scoring criteria for tourism promotion. Previously, we have had 2 categories, tourism attraction and marketing. This has kind of been consolidated into one, tourism promotion, and given a heavier point weight to reflect the consolidation and emphasis on the tourist attraction, as the goal with lodging tax funding is to fund events that really hit that 50 miles or more to get those heads and beds. So the application was updated to include question information that does ask applicants to clearly provide information, so it should be easy for this committee to review and find corresponding criteria to grade that. And then also has increased, the scoring transparency on the application and for applicants. They know specifically when they're looking at this, how this committee reviews and grants points to that. The other criteria that was substantially changed was the community and business collaboration. And part of this was driven from previous discussions from this committee in the past, asking, well, they said that they don't have any partnerships or collaborations, but did they at least attempt to? Recognizing, especially occasionally newer events or things, or depending on the time of year, businesses may just not have the capacity to partner. So based on that feedback, we have expanded and increased the point category to allow this committee to consider activities that may have made efforts to collaborate and partner, but were unsuccessful, versus activities that are able to, in their application, say, we have partnered with hotels, we have partnered with these businesses and things. So that has been updated to capture that feedback this committee has had in the past. And then the other criteria that was substantially updated and also derived from past discussion was the financial sustainability. Last year, this committee had a lot of interviews that were requested specifically to get a better understanding of the applicant's financial situation and ability to provide activities if they didn't receive lodging tax funding. So this category has been updated to really highlight and was the application. If you do not receive funding, are you able to have your activities still, which is one thing this committee is interested in, and would they be limited at all? This also helps reinforce the fact that lodging tax funds are distributed on a reimbursement basis. So recognizing the role of financial sustainability for events if they're only going to get this funding after the activities have occurred. Any questions on those scoring rubric updates at all?
I don't have any questions. Real quick though, you guys. So, you know, the focus of the more heads and beds and you know, the council review, you know, in the last couple of years, we have taken some chances on some events where, you know, like South Sound Block Party, right? We saw it, we were like, that's not for us, that's not in Lacey, so on and so forth. But then we decided to take a chance the following year, right? And then we took another chance the year after. I think we've done it twice for them, right? And I think, you know, we've really tried to have as many events as we can, right? Especially through the spring and summer, right? So that we have these events in the city, people are having a good time, but maybe not all of them produce as many heads and beds as some of the other events. But we wanted the community to have access to these dollars because they are designed for this community to use. So you know, and I've heard things like, you know, other cities, you know, devote X amount of dollars percentage wise to their parks department or to their most heads and beds thing, right? Olympia gives like 80% or something like that, or what is their Olympia's percentage?
50% to the Washington Center.
Right off top, 50% to the Washington Center, period. And so, you know, the RAC is our most heads and beds place that we have in the city of Lacey. Even though it is our most heads and beds, does that mean we give them 50, 60, 70% right off top? You see what I mean? Do you see the number here? Mm-hmm. And so this is what you know, overall that we're looking at and talking about. And so I, you know, these last couple of years where we've taken these opportunities to do some of the smaller events like the military wives and the Christmas thing, the South Sound Block Party, and then there's a few others, you know, that there's staples that we do. Sway Market, the night market at Ricardo's, things like that we've taken an opportunity to say, you know what, this actually could be cool. They just need to start, right? Maybe they can grow it into something. Sway Market's been doing great. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've seen the turnout there, but yeah, they come back with some pretty decent numbers. You know, they got Dick's to come down, but are they drawing people from 50 miles away? And so that's the rub. Yeah. So I think the design here is to you know, get us back on focus, get us back on track, get us back really attracting the 50 miles in a way so that we can fill up your hotels.
I also want to be really careful. We have a disproportionate number of hotels versus Olympia. So, I mean, for them to say that they give 50% or a percentage to their big heads and beds, we don't have as many hotels as them. So, I mean, I don't think that that's not a safe comparison.
I 100% agree.
So I want to be very careful to say that we are, I don't want to, I think we are unique in the way that we fund things. I think it's been great that we are taking chances on groups. Remember, this is a reimbursement, so it's not like we're not, there's no risk in putting on, giving funding somebody that if that event doesn't happen, there's no money out, you know, because they're not doing reimbursement. So I think that's what makes us unique. And I think that's really great to be not held to a bunch of policies and procedures, or we have guidelines and we have thoughts, and we've been very thoughtful about where we spend the money. So I would encourage us as a team to continue that route because when you start putting policies and procedures and all of these, we are then limited on what we can do. It's more, well, we set this policy, we have to go through with it. This is, you know, we really want to deviate from the norm, but we can't because we've created this policy. So I don't want to ever see us tie our hands completely where we're not losing the sight of helping these newer events get off their feet. I mean, since I was on this committee, now 6 years, something like that. I've seen a lot of really great newer things come in, and and they got started here in Lacey, and they've grown. And I think that's really cool that we've been able to help them do that. So I just want to continue to celebrate that we are different from the other jurisdictions, and I think
And
that's
I know
important.
the people, the residents, when I have been out with Parks Department doing questionnaires or, getting feedback from the users of our Parks Department, and also Lacey Spring Fun Fair, people always say, this place has so many great activities and events for our families. But I do understand what you're saying, we have to find that balance to make sure we bring heads and beds but continue to have these activities that make Lacey unique.
Yeah.
I mean, how many activities, and I can remember from years ago that Olympia couldn't keep doing, and then they gave it to Lacey. I mean, I remember the polar bear swim, and I remember the jazz festival, and there was another ethnic festival, I think, started in Olympia. So we got to kind of remember that too, that we
Absolutely, we do.
we need a balance.
In addition to that, there's the fundraiser activities, right? And so we'll have a conversation about that too. So, people making money off our money is not a mandate.
No.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
yeah, absolutely.
However, I've done the Reach the Beast bicycle ride, right, from here to Westport.
Right.
And I've gone to that, and the American Lung Association is a fundraising entity. They raise funds, and they try to help lung cancer and things like that. When I went to ride their event, we're all pulling in the parking lot at 0:30, unloading our bicycles, and I kind of walked around and said, hey, where are you from? Where'd you stay last night? If they weren't local. And so I would say 2 out of every 5 people that I spoke to were from somewhere else, came and stayed the night in Lacey, and rode that ride. So it's, how do we do that, right? Like, how do we say, you know what? Yeah, it's fundraiser, okay, but they're also putting heads in beds in our jurisdiction. So that's one of the things that we're going to grapple with this season.
Yeah.
Because,
And also, I want us to look closely at how much they're asking and what their budget is. Some people are asking for 100% of their budget.
100%.
No, I don't think that's okay.
Clarifying items too. So one thing that we did update in the application this year was specifically asking applicants to indicate if their activities were fundraising activities, and if indicating for their nonprofit status following curiosity and requests from this committee. Also recognizing, again, lodging tax funds are guided statutorily, and it is explicitly written to target 50 miles or more. And we, as a jurisdiction complex, do have to report, and part of that information is specific to overnight stays. So when it comes to lodging tax funding specifically, that drive is driven by state law, which there's no argument that we have some great events in Lacey and that they add value to our community. But when considering how restricted this funding allocation has to be, that's not coming from the city's perspective or the council's perspective. Additionally, when the council reviews this for revenue strategies, they may guide this committee to designate funding in different ways as well. So keeping that in mind. And also other jurisdictions do have other components to their funding decisions and other programs that the city does not. So when we're considering how other places distribute their funds, there are some significant differences in other operations that are not LTAC related that impact how they fund LTAC. One unique thing about lodging tax, as well as cities opt into it, not all cities have to collect it. And that does start, to plain talk it, there are 2 tiers. The initial implementation is a 2% rate on stays, and then the city can elect to do another 2%. So when we're talking about maybe 50-50 distributions, really what's happening is they're taking that baseline 2% and saying, okay, the initial 2% we're going to designate to X, Y, or Z. And then the other 2% they may designate for remaining things. So an example would be designating 2% to the RAC and the other 2% to all other applicants. So when you're thinking of a 50-50, there's a little more detail that goes into that, but also recognizing some other jurisdictions have programs to support events that don't need tourism that we don't, but unfortunately that limitation comes from statute too. So lots of variables to consider.
I mean, one thing, Sadie, to add on to that too, just for context and awareness for this group is the Commission on Equity has also made a recommendation for a community and cultural grant program that is going to be coming before the Lacey City Council in the next couple of weeks. And so we can provide this group with an update on kind of the outcomes of those discussions as well. But the idea would be that this would be a separate pot from lodging tax completely. So, Sadie just talked about all the statutory kind of requirements. This would be something else, potentially, if the city council elects to move forward with it, that would allow for local groups to, get funding to put on events in the community for kind of cultural events or community events.
Maybe easing this process for us.
There's, the potential that some of those events may be a better fit for
Yeah,
that,
for that.
especially if they're an event that does not necessarily drive that 50-mile or greater tourism, right? Because again, unfortunately, value to the community and tourism drive are different, which is unfortunate because we have such, as we've all heard, great events and things that add value to our community.
Have any numbers been discussed in terms of?
The kind of as it was proposed and worked through the Commission on Equity, and so again, all this information is available to go back and watch through previous meetings, was to kind of start small and to see how that progresses. So somewhere around 25,000.
As a starter pool.
Correct.
The last thing I did want to touch on, I know we have an extended application period now, but I did want to provide just a brief highlight and overview of all of the applications that we received during the initial application period and all the applications that you currently have to review and start scoring. So during the initial application period, there were 26 applications for lodging tax funding. The total funding requests on the initial 26 applications were roughly 860,000. So based on the update that we received earlier from Chelsea about available funding, you can anticipate that our asks once again will exceed the available funding. And then of those applications, 2 of them were first time applicants. So we will all have that information. Once the extended application period closes, I will provide an overview with the more detailed information that this committee is used to seeing, including the breakdown of types of applications and scope events. Any questions about this kind of initial applicant pool so far? I know not a lot to go off of.
Now it's going to be really interesting to try to get to the $5,000 minimum. So some groups, the reality, some groups probably aren't going to get funded, which
That's a pretty good
hard ache.
percentage of what is on this list.
I know,
it's a heartache.
right.
The next consideration I wanted to touch really quickly on is the consideration for interviews. This committee does, at the discretion, have applicants come in for interviews. This year, the recommendation would be up to 8 presentations with a 7-minute presentation window and an additional 5 minutes for the committee to have a back and forth question dialogue. Historically, this committee kind of reviewing applications has narrowed down here are the 3 big things that we want to hear from applicants, and then the city notifies the applicants, please be prepared to provide answers to these questions as they apply to your application. So they get a notice on what this committee wants to hear about. For applicants, as usual, we don't allow any swag or physical materials to be distributed during those interview periods. Visual aids, as in presentations, are optional. And this year, we will be providing anyone who's invited for an interview a template just to make sure that if anyone's watching or attending remotely, we don't have to worry about any information being cut off when there's the Zoom sharing and things like that. So we will provide that just to help with any technical issues. Still having a maximum of 5 slides to help aid the timeline, and then not having any video content in those slides. And again, that is just because it is very difficult to have the remote option in meetings and share that digital content. So when reviewing your applications and making recommendations, that's just some items for this committee to consider, and information about what we will be sending to the applicants regarding interviews when that time comes. I do have a brief review up here of the applicants who submitted applications during the current timeline. On this screen is tourism marketing and tourism related facility applicants, their funding requests, and then highlighting if they were interviewed last year, if they're a first time applicant, if the activities are located in Lacey, and if this is a City of Lacey event. So all information that this committee considered last year as well, and will be updated when the extended application cycle closes so that any additional applications will have this information for your consideration. But just a very quick review, and then on this slide we have applicants who applied as an event during the initial application cycle. And there's 2 slides of these, so don't get worried that there's not total 26. But again, the funding requests, if the applicant applied previously, did they give an interview during last year's cycle? Are they a first-time applicant? Are there activities in Lacey? And is this an event that's put on by the City of Lacey? And then here is just that second page of the other applicants who have already submitted in the original window with the same information.
We go back to slides.
To the tourism related facilities side.
Yes. Is EOB really located in Lacey? They move. Experience rental, yeah.
So the marketing applications are different because digital goods occur anywhere. So
Gotcha.
that is how that is reflected in
Okay.
that. And as a reminder as well, tourism marketing applications aren't scored with the scoring rubric because they do not have the same type of deliverables. So
Gotcha.
that arguably we could just have no location for them as well. But yes, that based on the nature of their activities is why they're indicated for in Lacey.
Thank you for that clarification.
Other questions? That's the end of my review. Because we have that extended window, this may be one of the earliest in history LTAC's meetings.
I know.
Real quick, who was the 2 new applicants?
Yeah, so we have one
This
first-time
one.
applicant which applied as a tourism related
nature
facility,
center.
which is the Nisqually Reach Nature Center. And then the other first-time applicant who applied during the first window is the second slide is the Meet the Beach, who is via the South Sound Estuary Association. So and again, these are the applicants who submitted during the original application period. This will be updated with any additional applications that come in during the extended window. Questions? Concerns?
I have more time to sit over these
They go
things.
through another interview process?
That's a great question. It depends on the committee's decision year to year. This committee doesn't have a policy as to how they do interviews. So it really depends on, one, what the applicant puts in their application. If there's something that the committee has a question about, sometimes returning applicants are interviewed more than once. I have heard from this committee in the past, those long-standing events and facilities, they like to hear updates or what's changing, how they're staying relevant in the tourism market. oftentimes first-time applicants are interviewed, but then sometimes just depending on the application materials, should this committee have questions that they really feel they can't make a funding recommendation until they have answers to, they kind of have decided in the past to interview. So it has been just at the discretion each year, and also depending on the budget, how hard the decisions may be to make and things like that. If it's a returning applicant, do they increase their funding request, and does the committee have additional questions about that? So that is really when we do that initial application review, something you as a committee kind of decide is if you feel you can make a decision based on the application, or if you would like to be able to ask further question.
Sometimes it might be like new and we've never seen or heard of it. And we're like, you know what, come on in, let's talk about it. Sometimes there's things in the application where like we can't really see who's truly behind this. And we bring them in and say, tell us about yourself. So sometimes it's because we want to know more, and sometimes it's like it's our first time. So we're like, we want to give you the opportunity to really tell us about your
And there is no limitation on interviews. The recommendations are just recommendations from staff based on time management and things, but there is no policy on who can and cannot be interviewed. So also at the discretion of this, the only thing we do is Stacy make sure that our interviews stay on time.
Yeah.
Wow.
So with that, I believe we have reached the end of our agenda. Thank you guys all for being here, and if there's no further discussion, I will call this meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.